say that, there's no real electoral pathway at the federal level in regards to the state of Ohio. I'm not necessarily sold on that as being an accurate, you know, especially in 2024. I'm not sold on that. Cleveland is going to be immensely important. Cuyahoga County is going to be immensely important. One of the things that gives me a little bit of, encouragement, motivation, what ordinary Ohioans already did in 2022 and 2023. Ordinary Ohioans demanded that they wanted to ensure that their liberties and their freedoms to do certain things in this country be codified under their state's constitution. So shout out to a lot of young people, but across the board, women and young people in Ohio, communities of color, from Toledo to Cincinnati to Cleveland, Dayton, Ohio, Akron, Ohio. Folks came out in droves to demand their right to use recreational and medical cannabis in the state of Ohio. And they got that proposition on the ballot. It's going to be on the ballot in November. Women and young people and people of color came out and demanded that women's rights, their rights to have and determine their own reproductive care, be codified under the Constitution of Ohio law. They got it on the ballot. And think about it. People like Dick Uihlein, billionaires, spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on a proposition issue in Ohio to oppose women's reproductive care, to not get it codified under the Ohio state constitution. And yet people power outpowered all of those millions of dollars that he spent to try to usurp and control Ohioan women of Ohio. It didn't work. And so this in part is why I think the Republican Party in Ohio is panicking a little bit. I'm going to give you some insight into why I think they're panicking. You all heard there's a little bit of a controversy going on in Ohio where the state doesn't want to put our current president on the ballot. Something about, scheduling and when delegates are supposed to. It's really wonky and technical. So technical, I don't even understand it. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense. How are you a state in our union and not going to list the current president on your ballot? In essence, not give your own citizenry a choice. How are you going to do that? Doesn't make much sense to me. Outside of them being petrified and terrified that they could lose the state of Ohio in 2024. To me, something that's not going to get really spoken about until probably September or October, maybe late August, is how competitive Ohio is going to be at the congressional level, at the state level, and at the federal level. Ohio is going to be competitive because young Ohioans want to set a new course. Yeah. And a lot of the old establishment, mostly male establishment in Ohio, is shaking in their boots. Those two propositions, the legalization of marijuana and the codification of women's reproductive care, has the potential to draw millions upon millions of Ohioans to the polls. Record youth turnout could potentially happen. Now, it's not saying that there is going to be direct correlation between people voting in favor of those propositions and people also choosing to vote for a Democrat or for President Biden. I'm not saying that there's going to be direct correlation. But what the concern and what the worry is that they know those propositions are going to draw out a certain segment of Ohio citizens who don't generally or usually participate in elections. A lot of folks who, would vote for legalization of cannabis don't necessarily vote in every election or any election for that matter. But that's the one particular issue that they care about. And they're concerned that if they care about that, then they might be concerned that they care about our current president, who is the first president since the 1970s to take marijuana off of a Schedule 1 classification and now move it to Schedule 3, which, is not, it's not the greatest of victories, but it is a big fucking deal. Because now, it's not something that folks are going to, in many parts of our country, except for, the most rigid and conservative parts, is not going to be something that people are going to outlandishly and look to outwardly try to criminalize a person for. It should have never been the case that they were, but we can all cry about what shouldn't have been. We have to talk about the reality of what was. A lot of folks in Cleveland, Akron, Dayton, Ohio, Cincinnati, they got hemmed in the system due to marijuana charges. So for a lot of folks who are going to come out and vote on this proposition in November, it really truly is personal for them. I listened to some of the young activists who led the way in that proposition. It's highly personal for them. They themselves, or either they have loved ones who went through mass incarceration due to the war on drugs and the criminalization of marijuana. For the young women activists who led the way in getting reproductive care on the ballot in November, it's highly personal to them. Having less rights than their mothers, their grandmothers, that's highly personal to them. So I think there's the kind of overthinking of underestimating young people in Ohio. but they won't, come back out in November and finish the job on these propositions, get them over the line, and codify it into Ohio state constitutional law. But I'm kind of leaning the opposite way. I kind of think they will come back out in record numbers to do it. And I kind of think the Republicans know that's not going to bode well in their favor in November. In 2022, it was really surprising how well the Democrats did at the congressional level in terms of victory. You have the freshman Congresswoman, Amelia Skye, doing a great job, really latched on to that issue of reproductive care and cannabis legalization, really helped some of the young activists really maneuver the technical components of getting that on the state ballot. Yeah. So with a lot of young vigor, in these cities, I think that, Ohio is not necessarily in the bag for the Republicans as much as people might want to say or think. I'm thinking Ohio might be a sleeper in 2024. It's the dark horse. This is why, J.D. Vance, the senator, the freshman senator out of Ohio, his name keeps getting rumored to be Donald Trump's VP. I think the Republicans know there's big trouble in Ohio. And even if J.D. Vance is named as Trump's VP choice, that's not necessarily going to ensure that he wins Ohio. You have the former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, from Wisconsin, saying that, he's not going to support Donald Trump. That's pretty big. Former Republican Speaker of the House from Wisconsin, not too far away from Ohio. Haven't heard much from another former Speaker of the House, John Boehner. I wonder what he's planning on doing. Hasn't spoken too much about the election. John Kasich, former governor of Ohio. Not a great fan of Donald Trump. So you have Republicans all throughout the Midwest. Joe Walsh, former congressman in Illinois. You have a lot of Republicans. Adam Kinzinger, former congressman in Illinois. Lots of Republicans in the Midwest. Who used to be elected Republicans. Very sour on Donald Trump. And so the Midwest is really tricky. Because on the one hand, it's kind of traditionally more conservative, leans more Republican. But the folks in the Midwest don't seem to have a great appetite for another Trump presidency. That's the way I would look at it. And outside of Iowa being an anomaly in the, Midwest, due to Donald Trump when he was president losing the tariff war against China and subsidizing pretty much all of the white farmers in Iowa, outside of something like that, he doesn't really have very much support in the Midwest. This is a fact. Yeah, Ohio is very tricky. I'm not necessarily sold on the fact that President Biden and Biden Harris will carry Ohio. You know, they lost it in 2020 by a pretty substantial amount. But I don't necessarily know that they don't have a shot. I'm kind of thinking that Ohio is within the margin of error, if I had to speculate. I haven't seen any internal polling to suggest that fact, but, you know, I'm looking at what the citizens who live in Ohio actually did in 2022 and 2023. They just had a special election in a deeply red conservative district, plus 36 Republican district. And the Republican ended up winning by 9 percentage points. Whereas 2 years ago, the Republican won by 36 percentage points. So something's happening in Ohio. I think a lot of young people are fed up with the Republican leadership. You know, there's been a lot of racial animosity in Ohio from what folks are telling me. People who live in Cleveland say that they feel like they're under constant assault from the state, from the Republicans, and from MAGA. Constant. Yeah. So, you know, I'm really going to focus a lot of my energy on Cuyahoga County in Cleveland. I might go to other places, but I really want to focus my energy on Cleveland. I think folks in Cleveland, you know, they're going to surprise us this year. So you all, you keep your eyes open on Ohio and Cleveland. If you're in Cleveland, you know, make sure you opt to participate this year. It's very important. A lot of times people will be like, well, I'm not enamored by the choices that we have. That's fair enough. But, you know, all things considered, when you take all of those things into account, you know, opting for the couch or Project 2025, me, I'm not choosing neither one of those choices in 2024. No. Can't really afford to, even if I wanted to. And you all, you know me, I wouldn't lie to you. If I could afford to choose the couch, I probably would myself too. But you got the former president on record saying that he wants to pardon all of those January 6 people. Now listen to me, Cleveland, this is very important. Because this is going to be a point that I'm going to drive home from now up until November the 5th, because this is very important. The former president says that all those people he incited to storm and attack the nation's Capitol building, put up nooses and gallows on the Capitol ground. He says those people now are political hostages. Okay. Well, follow this logic to its valid and reasonable conclusion. If he wants to pardon all those folks, you know, people who live in Delaware but went to D.C. and took Confederate battle flags into the Capitol Rotunda, if he was to pardon all those folks, clear their record of everything that they did, Ethan Norton with the Proud Boys out here in Seattle, just wipe the slate clean. My question is, where do you think they're going to go? Now that they've had their slap on the wrist, kind of, so to speak, if you can even call it that. Because if you attack your own nation in 2021 and you're spared of your punishment in 2025, that's not even a slap on the wrist. Where do you think they're going to go, though? What jobs do you think they're going to apply for? Well, they're going to be on your local police department, for sure. They're going to apply to be FBI agents because, remember, they're going to do a mass termination of folks whose social security numbers end in odd numbers. But Vic Ramaswamy already gave that away. And we know people whose social security numbers generally end in odd number happen to be Black Americans in this country. This is a fact. So they're going to apply to be FBI agents, CIA, work with the Department of Education. Yeah. And they're going to have complete immunity, just like he wants, for doing whatever they want to do to terrorize us. And we don't have to look far as to what they want to do because we already saw it when he was president. 2019, 2020, hate crimes soared by 3,000% in this country. Now, he's got a lot of nerve talking about how Milwaukee is a horrible city because of crime. When hate crimes were soaring in this country when he was president, he did nothing about it, period. No executive orders, no speeches, no nothing. Nothing was done to quell hate crimes in our country. It spread rapidly all throughout our republic, to the point where elderly Asian women were being assaulted by men. And he did nothing to protect these women. Nothing. We haven't forgotten how Alex Fields Jr. got into his Ford F-150 and rammed it at full speed, murdering Heather Hare in Charlottesville. We haven't forgotten that. We haven't forgotten them outside, with tiki torches, chanting, "Jews shall not replace us." We haven't forgotten that. We haven't forgotten how they allowed Nazis to be all outside of Disney World under Ron DeSantis. How they're banning Toni Morrison books in Florida. We're not forgetting any of this. And it's extremely important. All of it, you can put it together. And when you put all of it together, you get a very, ominous picture going on in this republic. It's very ominous. And it's not good for any of us. It doesn't bode well. It's not going to have a very happy ending, this story, if it continues. If he's allowed to continue trying to do what he's doing, it's not going to have a happy ending for us. My personal opinion is he should be held accountable. Meaning, instead of the presidency, it should be the prison. Yeah. It should really be Trump for prison 2024. Yeah. And we know that's why he's running for the presidency to begin with, to stay out of the big house, so to speak. Yeah, every metropolitan city that has diverse populations, not just Cleveland, not just Milwaukee, not just Chicago, not just New York City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Los Angeles, every city and every community that believes in diversity should be very concerned. Because we know what those folks are going to do. Once they get pardoned, yeah, they're going to be like, well, no harm, no foul. Because the message is going to be clear as day. We can do what we want to do, and there's going to be no ramifications for our actions. One of the many reasons I don't support Trump is because he allows a permission slip for people to behave in a very atrocious way towards their own fellow citizens who they clearly have a deep disdain for. And you know, it's okay to not like certain people for whatever reason, you know, you come up with as an individual. It's no prerequisite that you have to like a person. But you don't get to terrorize people you don't like. You don't get to do that. Recently, there was a story of a man in his late 50s, nearly 60 years of age, who lived in Prescott, Arizona. And he was wanting to plan a mass shooting in Atlanta this year, this summer. And his rationale for wanting to plan this mass shooting was he wanted to just murder as many black Americans as he could. He felt that that would lead to an ethnic war, another civil war in our country. And that if Donald Trump were elected, which is what he would hope to be the case this year, that Trump would declare martial law and send in folks to, you know, exterminate black people. This is what he was advocating for and what he was planning. He had the concert all picked out. Yeah, he was going to pick out a Bad Bunny concert in Atlanta. He had what he was going to do. He was going to, you know, shout racial epithets as he was murdering people, men, women, children, throw Confederate paraphernalia and flags on the ground. He told all of those investigators, go and look this story up. He told all of those people how much hatred, venom he had in his heart for black Americans. He told everybody. Unbeknownst to him, he was talking to a few federal agents, and, you know, they kept tabs and had to arrest him as his plan was unfolding. But this is just one of many examples of how people in the MAGA movement associated with Donald Trump feel about certain citizens in this republic. It's just one of many examples we've seen. Now, we can't say that this sickness that we are seeing is unique to Donald Trump, because we've had this sickness long before Donald Trump. You know, Jim Crow and segregation, redlining, Tulsa race massacres, all of that predates Donald Trump. But what I will say is this: the toxicity, the horrendous aura around Donald Trump, the violence that he stokes, it allows other sick, deranged, demented individuals who live in our republic, it grants them permission to do what they want to do as well. He gives those type of people a permission slip to do it. Just like when Kyle Rittenhouse murdered 2 people at a Black Lives Matter rally, he wanted to be seen, photographed, days later, giving the thumbs up with Kyle Rittenhouse. So he invited him to, I can't remember whether it was the White House or Mar-a-Lago. And there was that infamous photo of them both giving the thumbs up. Job well done. Now, Cleveland, we have a choice. We can continue with the current administration, which I think is doing a wonderful job, all things considered, based off of the royal mess they inherited under the previous administration. We can continue down that road, or we can go back to the nightmare that was Donald Trump. That's really our choice. In essence. For now. Down the road it could be different. But for now, that's what we're looking at. So I have to talk about the here and the now. And if that's our 2 choices, and then you have a choice to not participate, to opt out, to vote for the couch. Because people say, well, I'm not voting, as though that's not a choice. But that is a choice. Because for all the people who are saying, I'm not going to vote, it's not like one of these candidates won't become president if you don't vote. Yeah, think about that. If you choose not to vote, it won't stop President Biden or potentially Donald Trump from becoming president. You not voting. So people who try to act as though voting for the couch is a grand old solution, it's not. If you don't want to have a voice and a say-so in your own country where you live, you have every right to do so. But just know others who might not be aligned with you, might not like your existence all so much, they definitely are not opting out. They definitely want to make a choice to tyrannically control and terrorize you because you didn't want to make a choice to alter and defend yourself and your family. In a democratic republic, your vote is your ultimate voice. That's it. Opting out doesn't, change what's ultimately going to come. Project 2025, some people say that a lot of those things are already implemented in our country. I wouldn't disagree with you. But if we want to dismantle those things, then we have to remove a certain crop of people who are currently legislating and making those things a reality. So when people say elections aren't the be-all, end-all to every solution, no. They're not. But they're a ginormous step in that process. If you remove a lot of these legislators who are making bad laws, who are stripping away rights from the citizenry, and you elect new people who will provide more freedoms and more rights to citizens, not take them away, then that's a huge step in terms of progress. That's a choice. It's clear as day, Republicans are taking American citizens' rights away. They say on paper that they're for limited government. But if they want to be in your doctor's office, in your medicine cabinet, if they want to determine what type of medications you use recreationally, if they want to ban certain books from you and your children to read, it doesn't sound like that's too limited, the government, in my purview or opinion. Sounds like that's a very intrusive, overbearing government that doesn't allow for certain ideas, principles, and perspectives and freedoms to be had by certain citizens. I've always said, if you don't want to partake in utilization of cannabis, you don't have to. Nobody's forcing you to. But for those amongst us that do, why should it be criminalized? There is no research whatsoever that I or anyone can point to that says that marijuana is more dangerous or more harmful than alcohol, than Tylenol, than NyQuil or Dayquil. Every medication, every drug has a side effect. And to say that one type of drug, because a certain group or a certain community, or there's religious connotations around it, to say that that type of drug shouldn't be utilized by the public because certain people have a pent-up penchant or dislike of it, doesn't allow for freedom of people who don't ascribe to those notions or beliefs. To say that because you don't agree with someone's lifestyle and who they choose to, have a partnership with, that you're going to legislate where they can't, visit their loved ones if they're in the hospital, get married if they choose to, be able to adopt children if they want to, because you personally don't agree with their lifestyle. It's against your personal religious beliefs. That's not too limiting of the government, in my purview or my opinion. These folks have said they're for limited government, but it seems like to me they're very much for intrusive government. Very much so. And I think the people of Cleveland, they want freedom. I think the people of Ohio, they want freedom and liberty and justice for all. And based off of what folks did by getting these two propositions on the ballot for November, it clearly displays to me that there's an insatiable appetite for liberty, justice for all in Ohio. Well, this is why they're playing stunts and tricks with that ballot. So my call to action, you all, is to check your voter registration, no matter where you live in the state of Ohio. Check and make sure you are still registered, because what they've been doing is, if you're an inactive voter, Maybe you don't vote in every election. They just unilaterally, without telling you, remove you from the voting roll. So now is the time to check that you're registered to vote. Even if you're not planning to vote, I would want to be registered just in case. Because you always could change your mind. And you want to leave your options open and available in 2024 for sure. So check your voter registration. If you've moved or relocated to another part of Ohio, update your voter registration. If you're going to turn 18 before November the 5th, you can register if you're 17 and you're going to turn 18 before the 5th. Can be your first election you vote in. Hopefully it won't be your last. You know, these next few elections, 2024, 2026, 2028, 2030, 2032, these elections are going to be extremely important in terms of setting the trajectory of this republic for the next couple of centuries. The next president could appoint 2 Supreme Court justices. That's really the difference between currently, in its current incarnation, having an 8-1 conservative majority, have mercy, or a 5-4 narrow, moderate to liberal majority on the court. Yeah, these elections have severe ramifications. So when people say, you know, there's no difference between the two, Ketanji Brown Jackson, Associate Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson of the Supreme Court, the first black woman ever appointed to the Supreme Court in our entire nation's history. Elections have consequences. They really do. And if there was no difference between Biden and Trump, the Republicans and the Democrats, well, then we would have had more than just one black woman on the Supreme Court by all of this time. Vice President Kamala Harris, the first female vice president in our nation's history. Stands to reason we would have had other women be vice presidents if there was no difference. So, you know, sometimes we say things without actually properly doing the full thinking behind what we're saying. And certain folks say things because they don't feel the change, or they don't feel, you know, how these things are impacting them right now, currently, today, tomorrow. But if this has been an issue throughout centuries in our republic, then it's going to take more than 4 years to solve these type of ginormous, enormous problems. Look, I'm going to be honest. When I voted to elect Biden and Harris, I knew that they weren't going to solve every issue in this republic in 4 years. I'm enormously proud of all the progress they have been able to make in that short amount of time. Firstly, they had to clean up from a royal, ginormous mess that their predecessor left them. When you think about how he hollowed out the Justice Department, how he weaponized many of the different, institutions in our government, from the military on down. When you think about how our citizenry was at each other's neck over whether to wear a mask or not, whether we were going to get vaccinated or not. When you think about the ginormous amount of hate crimes that were occurring to our citizens of color, or that were occurring based off of people's religious denominations. All of those things were something that Biden and Harris inherited, had to get in office and clean up. Coronavirus was the main thing people wanted to get under control. We all knew that it was going to ripple out into other things. Inflation was something that was baked in the cake. It's like when you make a cake and you forget to put the yeast in and it doesn't rise. Once the cake is baked, you can't cut it open and put the yeast in and think that it'll rise. No. Donald Trump spent $8 trillion in 4 years. That was going to lead to inflation. No matter who was elected president. You could have elected Einstein or Houdini, and neither one of them would have been able to starve off inflation. When you have a global shutdown that affects every supply chain on the planet, this is why globally every nation is dealing or has dealt with inflation. So, as much as possible, it went from being 9% inflation that we were dealing with at the height to now 3% inflation. Yeah, it's been difficult. I knew it was going to be difficult. Because I knew the type of mess that, was going to be needed to get cleaned up. When I say a royal mess, I mean a royal mess. Shattered glass at the Capitol building, pipe bombs being left at the DNC and RNC headquarters, feces spread all over the walls, laptops of former speakers of the House being stolen out of the Capitol building, Confederates waving their flags in the rotunda. Yeah, it was a royal mess. And if you think that the premiere was bad, we all know that the sequels are always worse than the premiere. So, I like the fact that folks in Cleveland, they were thoughtful about what they could do to make their state, where they live, a better place. And they went out as citizens and got together, collaborated, innovated, and worked tirelessly to get to the point where they themselves can codify their own freedoms into the state constitution of Ohio. That's a lesson that, democracy, direct democracy, actually does work. And that's why a lot of conservatives are scared. Because they saw what those young people, what those young women, what people of color can do when they get together, collaborate, innovate, and put their mind to getting something done. And that model they don't want repeated across this republic. They don't want it done. So, this is why I have a lot of, I'm feeling a certain way about Ohio and Cleveland. I feel that you guys, you work together to get things done. I saw a young woman, and we'll close on this. I saw a young woman. She was talking about how she started a walking club for other young women in Cleveland. She simply said, you know what? There was a need. People wanted to get out and meet people. There wasn't very much of an avenue or way to do it. And she said, why not I just start a walking club for young women? And now it's one of the biggest, most popular things for people to do in Cleveland. Women just get together and share memorable experiences and meet other women. And we can do this throughout our republic. We really can. We don't have to wait for some senator, congress member, president, state senator, governor, mayor to do what we know is a need and to address it. We don't have to do that. And Ohio is really leading the nation in that. And I think that's why it's going to surprise a lot of people November the 5th. I don't believe it's a slam dunk for the Republicans in Ohio. I really don't. Not from what I'm seeing and not from what I know of the people in Ohio. A lot of times, conservatism beats down our spirits. What I believe is having the opposite effect in Ohio is actually motivating people. It's one of the few places where I actually see people are motivated to gain more freedoms and take back the freedoms they've lost. Yeah. So you keep an eye on Ohio, keep an eye on Cleveland, Right now we have somebody who's a native of Cleveland, in Tiffany Cross, just really providing the citizenry a unique and different perspective. Cleveland and Cuyahoga County are extremely important. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Yeah. And so expect to see me a lot in Cleveland. Yeah. I'm going to barnstorm Ohio quite a bit. Just like we did in 2022, but even more so. And we got Amelia Sky over the finish line. And I think that, I think that people are going to be surprised come November the 5th about what Ohioans are going to be able to do. Yeah. Ohio. I remember this is a little off topic, but I was in Soho in England, very much a party district. And there were two young ladies from Ohio. I was staying with them. You know, we were up in Elephant and Castle, and then we went down to Soho to have a good time. And these two young ladies were hella fun, really wild and fun. And we were up all night into the wee hours of the morning just having fun, you know. So, I say that to say this. Ohioans, you know, they're an interesting group of people. I really can't peg them as being conservative or liberal. They sort of kind of march their own beat. And for the most part, I've always had good experiences with Ohioans. When I was out in California, you know, I knew an Ohioan, you know. And so I got nothing but positive things to say about Ohio and Ohioans. I know they voted Republican in these last few presidential elections, but I don't believe Ohio is as conservative as they make it out to be. I believe a lot of people have been opting for the couch. They've let apathy and complacency set in. But with these two latest ballot propositions, the legalization of cannabis and restoring women's reproductive rights, I think the Republicans have awoken a sleeping beast. Yeah. And I think they're going to find out on November the 5th. For sure.